So let me throw something very interesting at you. So for most of human history, the few people who could afford to really be large were wealthy. They could afford as much
Huh.
food as they want. They ate. Fat was a sign of wealth. And I would say even up into the 19th century, change came when the industrial food system provided food that was remarkably cheap.
Dr. Albala, we talked about food history, so let's now turn back full circle to dieting and drugs for dieting, such as Ozempic, Wegovy, Mounjaro, which inspired my conversation with you. Going back in history, were there drugs, let's say devices or procedures prescribed to people to lose weight?
Well, this is really it's a controversial topic. Yeah, there are
Why
scholars
is it
out there.
controversial?
Well, there's some people who disagree with me about when it actually comes out, but I'm going to stick to my guns here. And I
Okay.
would say that humoral medicine does not have a concept of clinical obesity. They generally think that some people are bigger, some are smaller, and that depends on their internal heat. And there's nothing aberrant about it. It's not a pathology. It's just a body type, which sounds nice, actually. When you get to
Yeah.
the 18th century, there are mostly German people doing defending their dissertations when body fat becomes a hot topic. And I would say a dozen or so dissertations come out of Leipzig and Halle and universities where people start to explain why people are fat, not only using very non-humoral terms, they're using mechanical terms and very, very different physiological systems.
Hmm.
Um, but they're also providing remedies. And I think the turning point is when there's a public saying, Doctor, I trust you. What can you do with me? I know that there's something wrong with this. And the doctors themselves start saying, yes, this is a pathology. There's something wrong. You're unhealthy. We're going to provide remedies. And their diets. There's, George Cheney is the most famous of these in England, who promoted a milk and seed diet. And he himself was over 450 pounds and lost a
Good
few hundred pounds.
Lord.
And he was sort of poster child went to Bath and did these, bathing and eating diets, but he lost a lot of weight himself, then gained it back, then lost it. He was
Yeah,
the Oprah of his era, really.
yeah.
Um, but there's a lot of people like that. And I'm, was trying to figure out why does this happen right here. And I think it has to do with the breakdown of the humoral physiology, which we talked about before, and the introduction of mechanical theories that tried to explain why fat sticks to the body on some people and not on others. And they were trying to think in chemical terms, strangely enough, which are not humoral terms at all. They were thinking there's this difference in the body chemistry. One particular author, another English author, I think it's Thomas Short or William Short, Thomas Short, I think, said that, well, this is a matter of the saponins in your body. Some people do not have the ability to break down the fats, so they're flushed out of the body. So he recommended that people eat soap, and the soap would be, the lye would dissolve the fat in their body. And it's like what the hell?
Did
So
he
so
did
so
he get sued? I mean, losses
no,
weren't that
this is
big.
the 18th century. This is
Yeah,
before
yeah,
laws like that.
yeah.
And there's many different, sort of in this thread of weight loss diets that begin early 18th century. There's George Shane. There's banting was very famous in the 19th century. In fact, to go banting is a verb, to lose weight. So
Oh,
so,
wow.
but you don't see that in classical Greek or Roman or medieval or even Renaissance medicine at all. There's no sort of consistent weight loss diets that people are trying to sell people. But by the 19th century, they are there and they do not go away. And as you know, people want an easy pill. They want
Yeah.
Ozempic. They don't want to, do anything that, and partly I think in a way we are a lot less sensitive about these issues than people were in the 16th century when they said
In
this
what
is a body
sense?
type.
Oh,
This is a body type. This is the way you were born. This is your, we would say, metabolism now. They didn't use that, but they didn't have a fat shame. They did not think of it that way at all. And by the time you get to the 18th century, there's like stories of fat people that they are gawking at this stuff. There's this one, gosh, what was his name? Rabbi Eliezer, a rabbi who was apparently just so fat that people would go and see him, and freak shows begin then. And it was just totally something to point at so that you can feel morally superior and say, oh, that person
Oh,
must be weak because look, they can't control their body size. And if they would just eat less and exercise more, and this is still there. I mean,
it's
you
still
see
there.
it.
Yeah.
And I
Uh,
think that there's a backlash against the sort of accept everyone for what size they come in, because physicians want to, it's a business for them and they make money off of it. And they like to think that a thin body is a healthy body. Well, it's not true. That's just fact, not a fact at all. There are plenty of people who are larger who are healthy. And if you're thin, you're not likely to survive most serious diseases. If you're fat and you have some excess nutrition there, you are actually. So I love when people say I exercise every day and that's why I'm so healthy. And look at these people with broken limbs and pulled tendons and all. That's not health. Of course it is. They destroy their bodies in all sorts of very unhealthy ways.
um,
So I
I
think
want to understand something here, Dr. Albala. Um, you're going back to the 18th century and saying that people, just like now, wanted an easy pill. Let's focus on the term people, because obesity, being overweight, or using the word fat that is somewhat derogatory now,
yeah, yeah.
is a thing, and societies are dealing with this. You had child obesity, like they have surgeries, like for example in Saudi Arabia for obese children. Mexico is now dealing with this, and we've been dealing with this for several decades now. When you say people, the interest in losing weight, did it apply to the masses, or was it?
So let me throw something very interesting at you. So for most of human history, the few people who could afford to really be large were wealthy. They could afford as much
Huh.
food as they want. They ate. Fat was a sign of wealth. And I would say even up into the 19th century, think of people like Taft, our president, right? He was
Yeah.
enormous.
Yeah.
And that was just, a sign of wealth. Wealthy people were big. That was okay. Um, the change came when the industrial food system provided food that was remarkably cheap. Anyone could eat as much as they want. And by the time you get to the mid 20th century and to the latter 20th century, the cheapest food, the junk food, was the most caloric, and the people in poverty tended to be obese more than people with a lot of money, because people with a lot of money said, I'm going to diet, I'm going to eat sensibly, I'm not, fat is a sign of weakness and immorality. Of course I'm not going to go around with excess weight. And so it is flipped entirely, is that
Yeah.
the obese people tend to be poor and the wealthy people tend not to be. Totally bizarre, but it has to do with the availability of food and the quality of the food. Of course, if you are wealthy, you can afford vegetables. They're expensive. They're not hard to.
Yeah.
Many places in the city you can't buy fresh fruits and vegetables, and so
Y-
eating well is a luxury. We need to think that when we say oh, we'll just stop eating Doritos and eat brown rice instead, it is never going to work. It's a stupid idea, because you know people are not culturally attuned to eating that way, and what's available to them is at the corner grocery store is Doritos, right?
yeah. Yeah. And many areas are food deserts, and it's not like
Right.
they can go to a Whole Foods if they could afford a Whole Foods
Of
and then
course,
eat
and that's
there.
exactly my point.
Yeah. Um, if you wanted our audience to remember just one point about food history after everything we've talked about, what would it be?
Oh
Just
gosh.
one item.
Well, I think everyone eats. Everyone always has. It's the one thing you cannot do without. You can do without sex. You can do without sleep too, a lot. But food is one of those things that you can fast for a while too, but you need food and water. Eventually, you're going
Yeah.
to die. So it's the one thing that is a great cross-cultural comparison, tool of comparing people across time and space, because people obviously have to make choices about food, the cost, the quality, the quantity, the social setting, the complexity of it. And it reveals, I think, much more about a person, a group, a society, a nation, whatever. It's more revealing than anything else. Because everyone has to do it, and
Yeah,
everyone makes choices about what they eat. So, to go back to Brillat Savarin, tell me what you eat and I will tell you what you are. It's not exactly you are what you eat, but you said that at the very beginning, right?
yeah,
So,
yeah.
but he means socially, psychologically, intellectually, culturally. Look at what a person eats. You will totally understand who that person is.
That's true. That's true. Dr. Albala, thank you so much for educating me and our listeners. And to our listeners, if you know of any history that could provide more perspective from the past on this subject, please share it with us and tell us what's your perspective. Thank you so very much.